So, this sort of seems like deja vu to me because last year I gave the talk on New Year's Day. I was talking about the history of New Year's Day and when making of resolutions, the customs, the traditions, what food to eat, even the religious origins of New Year's Day. It was out with the old and in with the new. And we wrote down things that we wanted to shuck off, and we burned our little slips of paper in the cauldron, and it was a symbolic way of letting go of our bad habits and distasteful things. So here we are again. We're not doing any of that. I think, for me, all the goodbye and hello to the new and making resolutions, bah humbug. I am now a New Year's Scrooge. I'm not going to be saying goodbye to last year, because the new year isn't an end or a beginning. It's a continuation of a cycle of living. So here's what we're doing wrong. We recall our losses, tragic events, our bad habits that are remaining with us. It's really negative. It is not the way to start a new year. I don't say forget the past because, as Shakespeare said, the past is prologue. It is what comes before and forms the basis of things that occur later. Forgetting the past doesn't work, obviously, because it helps shape our future. But instead of recalling tragic losses, bad habits that you didn't stop, or the bad habits you did start during the past year, we need to direct a focus for our introspection. And usually we do that by resolutions. If you like resolution things, here's a great, inspiring, all-inclusive list. Resolved to live with all my might while I live. Resolved never to lose a moment of time, but to improve it in the most profitable way I can. Resolved never to do anything which I should despise or think mean of in another. Resolved never to do anything out of revenge. Resolved never to do anything which I shouldn't be afraid to do if it were the last hour of my life. That list is courtesy of John Edwards. But for me, that list is virtually useless. It sounds really good when you read it off and you hear the things and say, oh yeah, that's great, that's a good thing. It's too encompassing. It's too generic. It's not really a way to help us have some introspection in our lives and to actually foment any good change. I'm not really sure how it breaks down to day-to-day living. You can break it down as you choose, but just as a list of resolutions, to me it's useless. For me, I'm not making New Year's resolutions anymore. Because once you make a to-do list, which is what it is, you either misplace a list, forget all about it, procrastinating even in the making of it, and then you feel guilty about having not made it, or procrastinating in the carrying out of the things that are on that list, and then you feel guilty about that. Because any list of the resolutions I made last year when I did the great talk about New Year's and all that, it's gone, it's forgotten. I probably did not many of those things that were on that list. Anything that I wanted to get rid of and burn in the cauldron, which I did, I forgot what it was, and who knows, it could still be here. The weakness of most New Year's resolutions is what I've heard in a quote that I've read is, they simply go in one year and out the other. That's my pun for Chuck, who isn't even here. And I don't do puns, so I was really happy to find that one. Okay, instead, why can't we just wake up every day, take the new day to be a new opportunity, a new chance? As they said in Anne of Green Gables, each day is new with no mistakes in it yet. It's a chance to discover and learn and make new mistakes. We could just set our goals for that one day. It's much less work than planning the whole year ahead, and I'm kind of lazy, so I like the less of the work, but it's much more timely and relevant to our lives and to accomplishing goals. Live for today, because yesterday's over, and tomorrow is yet to come. Today is present. It's today which will form our tomorrow, and tomorrow which will form the future. But how do we do this, and what's the goal? Okay, some say a new year is just starting over, and there's a Jewish tradition, and they have a wonderful way of undertaking this process of reflection and change. From the 10 days beginning in Rosh Hashanah, through Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, Jews are encouraged to participate in an individual and a collective reassessment of their lives. It's a serious 10-day exercise, which is then attempted to be put into practice. If we were to adapt that practice to a New Year's reflective process, it would look something like this. The first step is remembering, looking at what we've done, what we have become during the past year, what our accomplishments are. Focus on the positive, not the negative, not what we didn't do, not what we still have left behind that is the bad habits, just the good things that happened. And that is the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. That's called the Day of Remembrance. The second step then would be to measure what we've done and what we have become, and see it relative to our highest vision of who we could be and should be for ourselves and for our whole communities. And then the third step in that process is teshuvah. I guess that's how you pronounce it. But it's often translated as atonement or repentance. But it's not really about inducing sorrow or guilt. It means deciding in great detail what we're going to do differently in our lives. It means taking into account all those things that are likely to distract us or undermine our resolve. It's more than just a series of resolutions for New Year. It's a plan of action based on deep and intense soul searching. Now, carrying out those 3 steps in the Jewish tradition, that requires spending 10 days until Yom Kippur in intense and serious thought. But we can engage in that same basic process as we enter a new year. It doesn't have to be the 10 days, it's just the process. We might realize, once again, that we can be attuned to the energy in the universe that enables us to transform our lives and the lives of those around us, our friends, our family, our community. We can allow ourselves to experience most fully integrating spirituality and transformative energy, the thing within that we can bring to our communities, to ourselves, our families, our communities, and transform those things around us. We can allow ourselves to be open to the mystery and the power of the universe. So, by now you're saying, okay, this girl is schizophrenic. She said, don't just focus on day by day, but then don't focus on day by day. Engage in this introspective thought. Well, what I'm really saying is, it's not because it's New Year that we need to do what we need to do, the work we need to do in our lives. It's every day. We have more time at this time of year because things slow down, weather's cold, you get off from work, or some people do, and you have more time to do this introspective process. But it's a process that needs to be done all the time. It's not just for New Year. Now, you are also saying, okay, the title of this talk was supposed to be Feeling Good, and she has not been talking about that, so what the heck is going on? My goal, not for the new year or a new beginning or whatever, just my goal now, today, and for the days of my life, is to engage in thoughts and actions and develop spiritually in a way that will help me achieve happiness. That is what we're all looking for. We may all define it differently, but we're looking to be happy. So I've been getting a little help from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who wrote this book called The Art of Happiness, a handbook for living. And while I'm not I don't ascribe to any tradition or faith. I'm an atheist, so I was listening to Will's thing and I'm thinking, really? God? The reading. Okay, if I can substitute something else in there for that, maybe, because I don't believe in God. I believe in us. So this part of the talk is feeling good. What is happiness and how do I get some? So this day's goal, or a New Year's resolution, if that is what you prefer, is to seek happiness and to develop a way of being that will accomplish that. So there's two basic things on that list. To understand the truest sources of happiness for us, and then set priorities in our lives to cultivate those sources of happiness, to bring it to us. So, first we have to consider sources of happiness. What is happiness? I mean, feeling happy at any given moment is a function of how we perceive our situation, of how satisfied we are with what we have, whether material or friends, family, spiritual, whatever. It's different for each of us. So I'm going to throw out some thoughts for consideration, which I hope contribute to the quest of finding sources of happiness, which will lead to setting our priorities in life so we can be just happier people. First of all, comparisons. Generally, our feeling of contentment is influenced by a tendency to compare ourselves with others. We can increase or decrease our sense of life satisfaction by changing our perspective. There was a study done. They had one group of people fill out 5 things that said, I'm glad I'm not, fill in the blank. 5 things. It led to an elevation in the feelings of life satisfaction because the focus was looking at less fortunate people than we are. The other group who filled out the form that said, I wish I were, and filled in the blank, they determined those subjects felt more dissatisfied with their lives because their focus was on what they wished they could have, what they wished they could be, what they wished they could, and led to dissatisfaction because they weren't it. The focus was on acquiring whatever it is you were acquiring, not necessarily material goods. But if we reflect on those who are less fortunate than we are, and if we reflect on all the things we actually have, it can lead to much more of a sense of contentment. Not the things we wish we had, not the things other people had that we don't have, what we have. Another element in the whole happiness mode is happiness versus pleasure. Often confused, not even remotely the same thing. And it creates problems when we use pleasure as a basis for making decisions. We don't always make the right choices because a lot of times the thing that's good for us is denying or sacrificing a, quote, pleasure. Yeah, I can't eat that cookie because I gained way too much weight this year and I can't have any more cookies. Just say no, it does not work. Not on an individual immediate basis. Because what you're doing is focusing on the negative, on denial of something for yourself, on not having something. The focus is negative. And some pleasures are just destructive. Whether or not they give you an immediate rush of a feeling that you enjoy doesn't mean that it will make you happy in the long run. Each of you knows your own, quote, guilty pleasure. Mine is potato chips. I love them. So when I go to the grocery store, I either have to not go down the aisle or really exert a whole bunch of willpower to not take them off the shelf because they no longer love me, but I love them. So when I break down and I say, oh, I'm entitled to a little pleasure and joy in my life, get a bag of potato chips, then I eat them. Also, tremendously joyous. I have a great time. And then the heartburn kicks in and the feeling like, oh man, you just gave into that again, and it makes you feel crappy after you do it. Why did you do that? So, and I say, I'm not going to do this anymore, but eventually I do. Eventually I do it again. It may not be for a long time, and I may put it off, but eventually it happens. So, I want to read some little thing from the Dalai Lama's book here on the Art of Happiness about that focus. There is no easy solution to avoiding destructive pleasures, but fortunately we have a place to begin. The simple reminder that we are of what we are seeking in life is happiness. That is an unmistakable fact. If we approach our choices in life keeping that in mind, it's easier to give up things that are ultimately harmful to us, even if those things bring us momentary pleasure. The reason it's so unusually difficult to just say no is found in the word no. That approach is associated with a sense of rejecting something, of giving something up, of denying ourselves. But there's a better approach. Framing any decision we make by asking ourselves, will it bring me happiness? That simple question can be a powerful tool in helping us skillfully conduct all the areas of our life, not just the decision of whether to indulge in drugs or the third piece of cheesecake. It puts a new slant on things. Approaching our daily decisions and choices with this question in mind shifts the focus from what we are denying ourselves to what we are seeking. Ultimate happiness. A kind of happiness that is stable and persistent. A state of happiness that remains despite life's ups and downs and normal fluctuations of mood as part of the very matrix of our being. With this perspective, it is easier to make the right decision because we're acting to give ourselves something, not deny or take away something from ourselves. An attitude of moving toward rather than moving away. An attitude of embracing life rather than rejecting it. This underlying sense of moving toward happiness can have a very profound effect. It makes us more receptive and more open to the joy of living. So, what things can bring happiness? Sharing, having compassion for other people, and working in the community. Loving our children, our friends, our family, and being with our community. Those things can bring happiness. Everybody's got their own list of things that can bring happiness into their lives and open their hearts. Okay, why'd she play such a sad song? It's a great metaphor. I don't know any tree who would not shelter a bird. Trees do it. But I know people who won't shelter people. You know, I know lots of people who say, no, you can't have any of this stuff here I got, because this is my stuff. Do I want to share it with you? No, that would mean less for me. Happiness can come from those interactions, those points of giving of yourself, even on an individual basis, to a friend, to a family member who's in need, or to a total stranger in the community. Because we're all born, we all die, we all turn to dust. Whatever happens in between with our spirit, that's up to everybody to figure out for themselves, but the physicality of it is what happens. But I love that song because it's so evocative of what we don't need to do, of cutting off people from ourselves. I mean, a lot of times I have said lately, people have heard it, I love living in my little valley, there's no one around me, I feel like a hermit, it's wonderful. But that's because that's where I go to nourish myself. It's not because I cut myself off completely from the world or humanity or engaging with people. We all do need a space where we go to nourish ourselves, but we don't need to do it with exclusively, because part of what I believe brings people happiness is interaction with other people. You might disagree, but that's what I think. So, we can have good health, we can have wealth, we can have a bunch of friendship and companionship. All that stuff can be sources of happiness, but if we can, to be able to fully utilize them toward the goal of enjoying a happy and fulfilled life, your state of mind is the key. That's it. I mean, how many times have you read stories about people who win the lottery, get tons of money, they are not happier. Without the right mental attitude to start out with, you can have an embarrassment of riches, of any kind, of assets, of people, and still be dissatisfied, depressed, and even suicidal. It comes from your state of mind. Inner contentment is a mentally driven state. And it is better instead that we think about instead of thinking about all the things we want, as I said before, is to want and appreciate those things we have in our lives. And to appreciate those things that come to us in life. If we could train our mind, our spirit, our feelings, to gradually eliminate those factors which lead to suffering and cultivate those which lead to happiness. We need some inner discipline. We can transform our attitude and our entire outlook and approach to living and improve the quality of our life, our experience of our life. Now that spiritual process, if you want to, that's what I call it, it's a spiritual process. It can be based in faith, but it doesn't have to be. Again, I got to read from the Dalai Lama because he addresses it quite well. Although some of the rewards of faith may be based on specific doctrines, unique to a particular religious tradition, there are other strength-giving features of a spiritual life that are common to all religions. Involvement in any religious group can create a feeling of belonging, communal ties, a caring connection with fellow practitioners. It offers a meaningful framework in which one can connect and relate with others and can give one a feeling of acceptance. As an aside, this is what I find wonderful about this church right here. Because I can be an atheist, and I can come here and share with people who believe in God for whatever, in all the different ways that people out here believe, and we can share our journeys without judging the other person, because we're each on an individual spiritual journey. And everybody's got to find their own path, and that's why this place is wonderful, because we can all do it together, even though we're doing different things to get there. Strongly held religious beliefs can give one a deep sense of purpose, providing meaning for one's life. And these beliefs can offer hope in the face of adversity, suffering, and death, and they can help one adopt an external perspective that allows one to get outside of oneself when overwhelmed by life's daily problems. But there's another level of spirituality, and that is what I call basic spirituality, basic human qualities of goodness, kindness, compassion, and caring, whether we are believers or non-believers. This kind of spirituality is essential. I personally consider the second level of spirituality to be more important than the first, because no matter how wonderful a particular religion may be, it will still only be accepted by a limited number of human beings, only a portion of humanity. But as long as we are human beings, as long as we are members of the human family, all of us need these basic spiritual values. Without these, human existence remains hard, very dry. As a result, none of us can be a happy person, our whole family will suffer, and then eventually society will be more troubled. So it becomes clear that cultivating these kinds of basic spiritual values becomes crucial. All of the virtuous states of mind, compassion, tolerance, forgiveness, caring, these mental qualities are genuine Dharma, or genuine spiritual qualities. Because of all these internal mental qualities, they cannot coexist with ill feelings or negative states of mind. So engaging in training or a method of bringing about inner discipline with one's mind is the essence of a religious life, an inner discipline that has the purpose of cultivating these positive mental states. Thus, when one leads a spiritual life, whether one leads a spiritual life depends on whether one has been successful in bringing about that disciplined, tamed state of mind and translating that state of mind into one's daily actions. So this happiness quest, it's a spiritual and a mental process, and it's a way that we can begin to appreciate our potential as human beings and recognize the importance of inner transformation. It is not merely to follow your bliss, as Joseph Campbell says, although that may be a step along the way. Rather, the quest is to foster an inner discipline. Fight off negative states of mind, be a positive person. Get rid of anger and hatred and greed, don't focus on those. Cultivate the spiritual qualities that will foster a positive spirit within us. Kindness, compassion, tolerance, forgiveness, and caring. How we go about doing all that, everybody has a different way. And I have some ideas for future suggestions along that way, but that's not this talk. This talk's about feeling good. And feeling good to me comes from an inner sense of well-being. And that's how I'm planning to go about it day by day, not just because it's New Year. I have one more thing. So at the break, we can talk, after the break, we can talk about happiness, what we think it is, how we think we can get it, how we can work toward it, whatever your take on it is. But for now, I'm feeling good.